you said you've been coming to India for some time now, and you've been spending most of the time in Arunachala?
Well, no, actually, my first visit to India was 2003. Mm-hmm. And actually in 2003 was when this great awakening kind of reached its pinnacle. I visited a Christian ashram called Shantivanam in Trichy.
Shantivanam?
Yes.
In Trichy.
And it's a Christian ashram. And I was sitting in the ashram for the morning Christian Holy Communion service, the Mass. And usually when we begin the Mass back home, the priest will say, "The Lord be with you." So I'm waiting for this greeting. And they start off with, Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha.
Oh my God.
And suddenly I looked around and I was, am I in a temple or a church,
Yes.
And I then, what that caused at that moment was the Hindu world in me that was introduced to me by my grandmother was kind of suppressed for many years as I made the Christian journey into the Christian priesthood. That Hindu world suddenly awoken in me and crashed into my Christian world. And after all these years, I haven't been able to separate them, nor do I want to separate them, because a great harmony has come now. When I enter into the temple in Arunachala and I behold the vision of Lord Shiva in the Mulasthanam, and then I sit in a Christian Mass and the communion is blessed and the priest lifts it up for adoration, the experience is exactly the same. Form is different, experience exactly the same, no difference. And so while I'm in Arunachala, for me, we were talking about that verse, Jesus said, "I'm the way, the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me." For me, that has been very true. He's brought me to my Father, Shiva, you see, because it's the same mystery.
Wonderful. So in 2003, you had this profound experience.
Mm-hmm. And then I traveled a few times to India after that. I came in 2005 and I backpacked from Chennai all the way to Kanyakumari, visited all the great temples, the Chidambaram Nataraja temple. I visited Meenakshi Amman's temple, and in each temple, profound experience of God. It was a lovely pilgrimage right down to Kanyakumari. At the end of the pilgrimage, at the Vivekananda rock, at the bottom of Kanyakumari, I just bought a book by Vivekananda and I'm on my way back home now. I'm making the journey back up to take my flight to South Africa. And I open the book and the verse in the book says, "The greatest pilgrimage place is within your own heart." And then 2010, I did a pilgrimage along Gangama from Haridwar right up to Gangotri to Gaumukh. To Gaumukh, and the place where the glacier is, and from where Gangama flows. And what a profound experience, because even as I walked that path, I felt an immense sense of love from the Divine Mother embracing me, And it didn't feel disconnected from the love I feel when I'm in the presence of Jesus, you see. And so when I got to Gaumukh, I wanted a Shiva Lingam from Gaumukh, and there was a lovely black stone there, and I picked it up and put it in my backpack. And the next day when I went home and I took the Shiva Lingam out, on the Shiva Lingam clearly was a mark, and it was a clear sign of the cross on the Shiva Lingam. As a wonderful sign of Ganga Ma herself saying, it's all one. It's all one. Whatever you call it, it's all one. Yeah.
Wonderful.
And that's when I had that experience of Arunachala. So when I went back to South Africa for a year, I was continuing with my work in the church, but I felt like a part of me was left in the mountain. And then around September, I wrote to my bishop saying, I've got to have a long sabbatical leave from the church and official positions. And I just want to go and live in Arunachala and perform sadhana and just search for God at a deeper level, And so that's what I'm doing now, is I'm just living as a sadhak in Arunachala.
So how did this trip to Puttaparthi happen?
Well, my auntie, who was a devotee of Swami from South Africa, was coming over, and she rang me and said, "Well, join me to Puttaparthi, and I thought that was a wonderful opportunity and a sign that it was time for me to visit Puttaparthi and be in this lovely place where this message of oneness and universal truth is spoken of and practiced.
And you were introduced to Baba before? Before you came this time to Puttaparthi, you knew about
yes, in
Sai Baba.
South Africa a long time ago. I've read the teachings of Baba. I've watched videos on Baba. I haven't seen him in the physical form. I haven't received that darshan, but I have read his teachings. And I used to give discourses in some of the Sai ashrams in South Africa. So,
wonderful.
So I've been associated with the Sai movement for a long time.
Okay, that's beautiful. So what really fascinated you about Baba when you started reading about Baba and you watched the videos? Is there any particular thing that really pulled your heart?
The universal message, but I think the 5 human values for me was a wonderful expression of spirituality in action, what spirituality in action ought to be. And so I find the 5 human values very helpful, and I find again it resonates with the teaching of Jesus and what he taught about life and human life and the process towards God realization. I find the 5 human values very helpful in that.
Wonderful. In fact, I remember the conversation with Father Charles. In Bible it is said that you must love God with all your mind, with all your heart, and with all your strength. And Father Charles very beautifully interlaced that with the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. And he said, when it is said that you must love God with all your mind, it means
yoga.
Yeah, it means the Jnana Yoga. With all your heart, that is the Bhakti Yoga. And with all your strength, that is the Karma Yoga of the Gita.
Yeah. Well, there's 3 commands there. People think it's 2 commands, but there's 3 commands. There's love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Then love your neighbor as yourself. So you also got to love yourself before you love your neighbor. And so I see this love God with all your heart, soul, and mind as Bhakti Yoga. And then when he says love your neighbor, that's Karma Yoga.
Yes.
But this love of yourself is Jnana Yoga, because you can't love the self unless you awaken to the true self.
Yes.
Not the ego self, but the true self. So Jesus is teaching the yogas in the Bible, you see. Yeah.
Yes. And the greatest of all the yogas is the Prema Yoga.
Yes. The way of
ultimately,
love.
Just like all the substratum of all the 5 human values is love.
Yes.
Ultimately, truth, Baba says, truth, love in speech is truth.
Yes.
Love in action is dharma. Love in feeling is peace. So everything ultimately has the substratum of love.
The letter of St. John says God is love. So if God is love, that's the very definition of God, then wherever there is love, God is there.
Wonderful. In fact, you showed me the picture of your altar, and where you had the symbol of all the religions there, and the other picture you showed me where you have the statue of Lord Jesus, but he's adorned in an ochre robe. That seems so interesting. How do people receive all these things when you do these things in South Africa?
That picture was in my congregation, and as I said, the congregation has become quite open to that. And I think again, if this message of oneness is taught and spoken of more, I think the human heart responds to it, because in the deepest part of ourselves we know the truth, and when the truth is spoken, we resonate with it. The problem is religions have become so caught up in their own sectarian agendas that they don't speak this message. You see, for the sake of power, it's easier to speak an exclusive message.
Yes.
So we keep our little flock together,
Yes.
And it's almost dangerous to speak this universal message, because you might lose your power that comes from your exclusive sectarian doctrines, you see.
So you have never been afraid?
I think
because that you could be questioned.
Oh, I've been questioned, you know. I think some people have even thought I'm possessed, you see.
Okay.
It's gone as far as that. I think some people daily pray for my salvation, which is
They
good.
thought Jesus also was possessed by the Satan.
That's true, that's true.
They thought he was...
Yeah, they called him Beelzebub, you know, which was one of the names of Satan. You see, truth, when it manifests like light, it dispels the darkness. And the darkness fears it. And therefore the darkness tries to react against it. You see, untruth tries to hold its ground, but it can't for too long. Ultimately, it has to give up in the face of truth. And so I don't think I've ever been afraid, because perfect love casts out all fear. God isn't about fear. God is about love. So because perfect love casts out all fear, and if you know you speak in the truth, then yeah. And by the way, I follow the master who was prepared to die for the truth he spoke, you know. I can't claim to be a devotee of Jesus and then be afraid of whatever when it comes to the speaking of this realization that I've had.
Wonderful. But were there times in your life when you really felt cornered, when you really felt, I should not be going through this for speaking the truth? Why am I going through all this?
There's been moments when, you know, you kind of think, is it worth it? Because it would be so much more easier and comfortable to just go with the flow, you know, and teach what everyone else has taught.
And everyone is happy.
Yeah. But then in the deepest part, you can't be happy.
Yes.
Because you're not being authentic to who you are. Authenticity is important. That at the deepest part, I must be true to the truth that's been given to me. And each of us receive that truth in different measures, according to our own karmic dues and merits. And when that truth is received, I'm not claiming to have received ultimate truth. I think I'm far from that. But what I'm saying is, the truth that you receive, the revelation you've received, you must be true to that. In your speech, in your action, in the way you live your life, it must show forth. And so for me to say anything else will be untrue to that revelation.
And so that truth is what has given you strength to stand whatever came in the face of it.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's it. It's the truth. And it's the absolute belief.
That conviction.
That conviction that God is real. And if it is God who has called me, and it is God who is with me, then what do I ever have to fear? You know? People have said, oh, you're crazy to sell up everything in South Africa and go to Arunachal. How are you going to live? You don't have a job there and so forth. If your Father is the King of Kings, you will never be in want. And so when you follow Him at that deep level, you don't fear tomorrow. You don't fear people. You just live in the presence of the one who holds the whole universe in His hand. And so this is my conviction.
Fantastic. I think this is the feeling that you get when you read that book, Autobiography of a Yogi. I don't know if you have read that book.
Yes, by Paramahansa Yogananda.